I don't know how much you know about Japan and gold mining in the country, but my next guest here, John Proust, has a lot more he can tell us and educate us as we learn together. So understand that you're the largest explorer in the country. Tell us about what you're up to with Japan Golds.
Absolutely, and thanks for having me today. Japan Gold is a very unique company because we're in a new jurisdiction that most people are unfamiliar with, the country of Japan, where it hasn't been sort of thought of as being most prospective for making new gold discoveries or forming new gold mines. There's a rich history of high-grade gold mining in Japan, over 500 years of mining. But that was all stopped in 1943 in the Second World War, when the government needed the workers to go into base metal mines and steel factories. So at that point, they closed 76 gold mines across the country, and the industry stopped. After the war, only a few of those mines reopened, and today 64 gold mines are still closed in Japan that have never reopened since the Second World War. And some of these are two cooks in a coffee pot, as I say, and some of them are up to 10,000 people, so it's a real range. Fast forwarding a few decades, in the 1980s, in 1981, no one was exploring in Japan, but the Geological Survey was doing certain tests, and they happened to drill a vertical drill hole just to measure how thick the young volcanic rocks were and where the basement was. And when they drilled down 200 meters, they accidentally discovered what is today one of the highest grade Tier 1 gold mines in the world, Hishikari. Hishikari is owned by Sumitomo Metal Mining, and just to give you a sense of it, 14 million ounce ore body and growing. They've already mined over 9 million ounces at an average grade, an incredible average grade of over 30 grams per ton. So it's a really extraordinary asset.
Wow.
So we went to Japan in 2012 when, fortunately for us, the government changed the Mining Act to allow foreign companies to come in and to restart that gold mining industry that had been closed in 1943. They did that because the areas where the gold mines were located were becoming quite economically depressed. There was no other industry and people were moving away. So they wanted to restart the industry, and we had the skills to do that. We were the first group in the world to go to Japan, and we were the only group for 4.5 years. So we had the place to ourselves for 4.5 years. In that 4.5 years, we did a couple of things. The government was kind enough to give us all the data for these mines so we could study all the closed mines and understand which ones we liked. And we were looking for the same style of mineralization as the Hishikari gold mine. Secondly, there wasn't a permitting process really in place. So we helped them design the permitting process by giving them very good input on how it was done internationally, and then encouraging them to develop even a better permitting process that would get more direct foreign investment coming into Japan. And so we were successful that they took on board all those suggestions. So from there, we started applying for all the key areas that we thought were important in Japan. And there's really 4 gold districts there, and we now dominate all 4 of those gold districts. So that's how we got started. The next quick chapter was that 5 years ago, we had a competition because we needed then a big partner to come in with us. Newmont had already taken an equity stake with us through Goldcorp, but we had a competition. It was Newmont, Newcrest, and Barrick. And ultimately, we selected Barrick to be our countrywide alliance partner. And so for the last 5 years, we've worked together. They've screened our whole portfolio of projects, over 2,500 square kilometers, with geochemistry and geophysics. And we're now at a very exciting point because they looked at everything we had, and then they went to 3 specific projects that they felt had the potential to host a Tier 1 or Tier 2 ore body. Tier 1 being 5 million ounces or greater, Tier 2 being 3 to 5 million ounces. So 3 projects, all next to either past producing mines or next to the Hishikari mine. And so the inflection point that we're at now is we're just starting to drill those Barrick projects and the targets that we've identified for discovery. And over the next 6 months, we expect to drill their 3 or 4 best targets in Japan. The second piece is that 1 year ago, almost a year ago today, we brought on board a new discovery lead, and his name was Fraser McCorkadale. It's Fraser McCorkadale. Fraser's very well known in the mining community because he was the head of global exploration for Newcrest, one of the 3 competitors that wanted to be our partner. When Newmont bought Newcrest, or acquired Newcrest, we approached Fraser to come on board to Japan. He was very familiar with Japan. He'd been to the Hishikari mine, and he thought Japan had some of the very best geology in the world. So he wanted to join us. So he came on board with us, and he joined one of our directors and our chief operating officer, Takashi Kuriyama, who was previously the head of global exploration for Sumitomo Metal Mining. And before that, he was the general manager and chief geologist at the Hishikari gold mine. So we had two global experts, one specifically driven to Japan, and one globally familiar with the same style of mineralization, and that's the team that's taking our company forward.
Now, my next question is, we talked about the Barrick identified targets. As an explorer, the largest explorer in Japan, looking for gold, what else do you need to make sure that you're successful in, for the drilling you're doing for the next 6 months?
Sure. I mean, the key, and that's a great question, and the key is really about information and targeting. So we have the benefit of, again, when you're looking at a target for where you're going to drill, you want the building blocks that are going to get there. So you want the right geology, mapping, geochemistry, geophysics. So over the last several years, we've been compiling that information across Japan. And so we now have this incredible database that subject matter experts like Fraser McCorquodale and Takashi Kuriyama can now look at very, very carefully and really use that trail of clues to get to the point where we want to put the drill bit. And so I think that's kind of the best way for us to target. It gives us the best likelihood of success. But something that your audience may not be as familiar with, when we look at Japan, we use the term search space. So search space.
Search space.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's the search? So search space is it's a term that's used quite often in the mining world, and it's where you're going to look. So where the vast majority of even new discoveries today are found are, the colloquial term is, within the shadow of a head frame of an old mine. So we've got the head frame of the old mine, there's the shadow, so somewhere means somewhere around an old mine. And that's because often these mines, there was a vein that was popping out of the ground, they discovered this vein, they chased it into the ground, and they mined it. But veins are usually not alone. And so, but maybe there's concealed ones that are just a little deeper, not quite at the surface. So if you look around the mine, quite often you'll make more discoveries around a mine. And there's a good example of a mine called Gosowong, which is in Indonesia. Big mine. It's over 8 million ounces now. But when they found it, there was a vein that had about 800,000 ounces. Since then, they've grown to 8 million ounces, but most of it's concealed, but just around that first vein that they found. So that's a good sort of example. So that's one search space. But that's based on something that poked out of the ground. The other search spaces in Japan, it's a volcanic country, it's seismically active. And so there's been volcanoes, ash, and the ash has settled around, across the landscape. So there's sort of this thin blanket of ash, so you can't see those veins popping out of the ground. So then you have to use geochemistry and geophysics to find those subtle signatures at the surface that could say, this is a good spot where you should be drilling. You need experts that can do that. And fortunately, Fraser McCorquodale is one of the experts in the world that has made numerous discoveries along with his team at Newcrest. And this is exactly a similar situation in Japan. So Hishikari was the only blind or concealed discovery that's turned into a mine in Japan. We have 84% of the whole region, and we surround Hishikari now. And it's covered with that volcanic ash. So we put just a few drill holes in. Wherever we found mineralization already. So we don't know what the size of the prize could be, but we think it could be enormous, and that's why we're there.
Now, my last question to you is around your royalty sale. Can you tell us, me and the audience, about what it does and how it sets up the company in terms of financial benefit as well?
That's a great question as well. Thank you. we're in an interesting market now for junior explorers. There's many of them here at the PDAC, and capital's hard to come by. Now, we're very fortunate because our company, 63% of our company is held by 12 of the largest financial institutions in the world. They're all there because they have taken what they call a toehold position, so that when we go to build a mine with Barrick or Newmont or Sumitomo, with somebody, we can make a few phone calls and get the capital that we need for our portion of that mine build. So that's why they're there. They have such confidence and they've done their due diligence. Share prices are depressed. And so dilution, I'm highly sensitive about dilution. We don't want to do big offerings that are going to dilute our shareholders' interest. So I'm always looking at non-dilutive financing. So in the Barrick case, Barrick has to fully fund the projects that they're working on right through bankable feasibility to earn their interest.
Music to my ears.
Yeah, it's a wonderful place to be. So we really appreciate that. So with the need for funding for Fraser McCorquodale and the portfolio of projects that he has outside the Barrick Alliance, where he's been doing very specific targeting now, I wanted to fund that to get the first one or two major targets well underway. So we did something quite unusual for a company that doesn't have a resource or reserves yet. I went to the biggest royalty companies in the world, Franco-Nevada, Wheaton, Osisko, etc., and said, we're in this wonderful jurisdiction, we dominate the country of Japan, and there's this incredible high-value opportunity. So consider coming along with us. And we were delighted that Osisko Gold Royalties elected to come along with us and become our partner, financing partner. So we sold a 1.5% royalty for $5 million US to Osisko Gold Royalties. And then they have the option to give us another $3 million in a year. It's their option. And that will give them an extra 0.5% royalty. So they'll go up to 2%. The good news is that so first of all, those dollars will be very carefully focused on our very best one or two targets under the Fraser McCorquodale group. But it gives us a real financing sort of momentum to go forward and to consider other opportunities in the country as well. And so we're quite delighted to have Osisko on board with us. And it really speaks to, I think, the quality of the opportunity. Because, I mean, first of all, in Japan, there is almost no burden on a miner. So there's something called the mining product tax, which is like a 1% royalty to the government if you're in production. So if you take that, plus what Osisko has, it still doesn't put an enormous burden on a project. So it can still be very, very profitable. The other point is that in Japan, there's a very unique economic benefit in that the ore from the Hishikari mine is of a type that it can be directly shipped to a smelter, so it really doesn't need any processing at the mine. That same opportunity exists for us, and it allows us to have a very low all-in sustaining cost. Theirs is in the order of $500, where the global average, I think, is about $1,300 to $1,400 today. So very, very inexpensive and very, very profitable. My final comment to you, because I know we're short of time, and I'm sure you've got lots of guests today, is that when you look at Japan Gold, and when you look at any company that's here at this conference, it's all about de-risking. So if it's an exploration company, how do you differentiate one company from another? And the way you do that is you de-risk. So the way we've been de-risked is we have a relationship with the two largest gold miners in the world, Barrick and Newmont, and that have decided to put their money into our company and advance with us. We have 12 of the largest financial institutions in the world that have come on board with us, that did their own due diligence to look at Japan and Japan Gold. And now finally we've got one of the largest royalty companies that's come on board with us in a very unique setting and a very early setting for a royalty company. So we think that really bodes well for an investor that's considering coming on board with us and coming on this journey.
I think an important point is that you have a close relationship with the regulatory body as well. I mean, you were saying earlier that you actually were a part of implementing mining rules in the country, which is significant.
Well, to be very clear, it's the permitting process, and we provided an awful lot of input, and it allowed us absolutely to build that relationship, to build that confidence and trust. And so, because the government wanted the mining industry to restart, which is why they changed the Mining Act in 2012, they were delighted that someone came, and we were the first ones to come. But also, we get great government support at the federal level that decided to do that, at the provincial or prefectural level, which is very important, and then also right to the local town councils and the mayors. They want us. They see the benefits of us coming into their communities, restarting industry, the economic success of the hotels and restaurants and service providers that we use. So it's very very strong for the country, and I think they see huge potential to discover another Hishikari or more.
Thank you again for your time, John.
It's my pleasure. I'm glad to be with you today.
Yes, you too.